have storms in our lives that cleanse, clear, and convert the aftermath into a rainbow. If you have the right attitude, you can grow and weather the storm. Let's talk about it now over Lunch with Stormy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Lunch with Stormy. It is a Liberty edition, and today we have a very special guest. His name is Lennox Samuels, and he's joining the podcast from Bangkok. Lennox is a true Renaissance man. He's a reporter, a writer, editor, and media consultant based in Bangkok, Thailand. His career includes stints as an education writer, investigative reporter, fashion editor, city editor, news executive, and of course, foreign correspondent. And now he's a managing director for a consulting agency. He's also editing a book about Japanese philosophy, and he was one of the editors of a multi-part series which has been awarded the Pultizer Prize for international reporting in 1994, and we're going to talk about that. I'm thrilled to speak with him today because he does present a worldview that is truly global. And we need to hear this perspective right now because I think we're really caught up in our own backyards as Americans. And there are people in our current administration who like to preach about America first, but there are pitfalls that come with that stance. And to me, honestly, lately, it really feels like our world is on fire, at least our backyards are, and it's spinning on some weird axis. But I know some of you guys are feeling that too. So let's shift our perspective, set a collective intention, and get some perspective from Mr. Lennox Samuels. Please help me welcome him to Lunch with Stormy, Liberty Edition.
Morning, Stormy. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Lennox. How are you?
I should tell you, it's just after 10 p.m. in Bangkok, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah, we're doing the opposites of Lunch with Stormy. I'm in the morning and you're at night.
And you are my maiden podcast. So there you are. I'm looking forward to it.
I love that. Well, we have to get started with this Violence Against Women series that you edited. And it won a Pulitzer Prize. And before we got started, you went and got your prize, your trophy or award or whatever it was. And I know I had never seen one nor spoken to someone who's received one. So I thought it would be great to talk about violence against women because it was heroic and legendary when it came out. I believe there was an act, that was written into our laws at that time. But can you show us your little Pulitzer Prize and get started on that? This is truly, look at that.
Not going to be very visible, I'm afraid.
It's visible enough. That is iconic. Congratulations. And for doing it for such an amazing cause.
Yes, and I should point out that just to give credit where it's due, I was an assistant managing editor over national and foreign affairs, foreign news. And so I was more in a supervisory capacity, although I did read, edit some of the stories. But the principles, first of all, it was about 10 reporters, men and women, looking at things such as police stops in Dallas where women were mistreated, marital rape, female genital mutilation, a look at the treatment of women everywhere from Canada to the United States to Sweden, India, Middle East, and it went on for roughly a year, and it ran in 1993, and it was sort of pegged to a series of United Nations conferences on violence against women, and it coincided with the end coincided, I want to say in June 1993, with a major United Nations conference about the treatment of women around the world. So that's the backdrop. And it was, I might say, it was a remarkably ambitious undertaking for what was, at the end of the day, a regional newspaper, you know, the Dallas Morning News. One expects this sort of major project and major commitment from a New York Times or a Washington Post, but it was very much a project that was embraced by the management of the newspaper. No funds were spared, resources were thrown at this. It was seen as terribly important. And keep in mind that at this juncture, the Dallas Morning News was considered one of the best 5 or 6 newspapers in the country. Those were the salad days of journalism, when we were not being attacked as enemies of the people.
Right.
And so, you know, and so there was a great deal of support, and we were very happy with the receipts that it got once it ran, and it ran over several months strategically, you know, as part of a series. The series was called Violence Against Women, A Question of Human Rights. And so we had reporters fan out across the world, really, and in the USA, and taking a look at the treatment of women, which, as you well know, has been going on for some considerable time, and there is no cure yet. So that's
that it's phenomenal, and it does take a team, and I want to thank every single person on that team, because it shined a light of the suppression and treatment that was, you know, it could in some places still be going around the world. I do think it made a difference in at least bringing it to people's attention. Was there something that stuck with you throughout that time? Because a year of just researching violence and abuse of women, you would think would start some sort of depression as a man, as a woman, as anybody. Was there one thing that stuck out, you know, that made you really committed to following this through or bringing to people's attention, regardless of what country it was at?
Well, the remarkable thing, to be clear, is that the foreign desk at the newspaper continued to prosecute foreign news. So this was not something that they were exclusively devoting their time to. They were still doing the daily developments that, you know, bombings here and conferences there and decisions being made in different countries. And so this was something that they were doing alongside. I mean, it was a major thing, obviously, but they were doing it alongside their normal work. And I was overseeing national and international news. And so my attention was somewhat global in the sense of looking at the world, which is why I hasten to give credit to the people who really were driving this train. And Pat Gaston was the person who came up with the idea, and she was working on it night and day. To your question, however, I'll tell you what occurred to me, what struck me as I read the stories before and after they were published, was the understanding. You get a real sense of the sort of generations long, centuries long mistreatment of women. We're talking about, if you go back to sort of medieval India, where a widow was expected to climb onto the funeral pyre of her husband who was being cremated and self-immolate. So she died with him, you see? That's a phenomenon called sati, S-A-T-I. And so we had that backdrop to build on. And what we found,
chills.
It's extraordinary. And what the team found was, you know, India had long since passed laws outlawing that sort of behavior. But guess what? 1987. It's not like it was, you know, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. And I might tell you that that sort of thing is still being practiced in remote regions of India, mostly to the north. But you still got this business of women, you know, gang rapes, particularly on buses, by the Hindu community, and very little punishment. They've been struggling for years up till now to have it taken seriously and have the government move decisively against the offenders. And so you still got this sort of propensity across the globe, depending on where you are, whether it's in Kenya or it's in India or Pakistan or Saudi Arabia, where women are perceived as not only second-class citizens, but possessions, chattel. I give you an example. In Saudi Arabia made news a few years ago, not that long ago, within the last decade, where it finally allowed women to drive. Now, notwithstanding that, women still are not to go around Riyadh or any other city unless they're accompanied by a man or a male. It could be a son, a nephew, but they are not supposed to go around by themselves. You see, they are under the thumb and basically the possession of husbands and fathers and uncles and grandfathers and sons and brothers, all of whom rank ahead of them. You see,
that is,
it's an extraordinary.
It's absolutely unbelievable.
I'm talking about today. So what was good about the series, it really galvanized a considerable action, including a Violence Against Women Act, which was passed in 1994. And then it was subsequently reauthorized, I want to say in 2000, and then 2005 and 2013. And then the Democrats in the House reauthorized it in 2019, but like every other thing that's in the pipeline, it's being blocked by the Republicans. So it has not yet been authorized for 2020.
What does that mean exactly? It's not been authorized. What does that mean?
It means that the bill has not, the bill is renewable. It's not in perpetuity. So intermittently, a bill reaches sort of an expiration point, and the Congress has to decide if they're going to renew it or not. In this case, they have renewed it, and they did renew the act in 2019 briefly. Remember, in 2018-19, we had the government shutdown, and so the Violence Against Women Act was only authorized for, I want to say, 2 months.
I have to ask a question. What does it, I guess I looked it up a little bit, but what exactly does it entail that someone wouldn't say, of course we're authorizing a bill?
The bill is supposed to fund something to the tune of $1.6 billion originally, fund investigations in America of mistreatment of women. So there is a fiduciary aspect to it, which is probably one of the principal reasons it needs to be renewed, because Congress needs to earmark new funds to prosecute the function of that bill. Now, I know that there is still a Violence Against Women office in the government, specifically in the Justice Department, but the act has not been officially reauthorized. So it's almost like Bill Barr and his cohorts are proceeding without formal support from Congress, but there is a governmental office. In fact, the Justice Department Violence Against Women office just earmarked $18 million to be used in efforts to prosecute domestic violence in Texas. So there is activity, but you don't have the bedrock sort of support. And I might tell you, the ridiculous part of it is, for some considerable time, the Republicans have objected to reauthorizing it because they don't like the provision that said it covers same-sex partners. You see? So the bill was taking it beyond violence against women. So if you've got a gay couple and one person is being abused, that person was covered by the act. And of course, given the generally anti-LGBTQI posture of the Republican Party, they were not supportive of that. So we're in this predicament at the moment.
Oh, I'm so disappointed in them. I'm so disappointed. Did you? Not really. Do you? Okay, so we are talking about our Congress and out here. Are you a U.S. citizen? Do you have multiple citizenships? You're 100% U.S. Yep. I was just.
I vote all the time, including this year, which is very important to vote this year.
Yes. Did you get your ballot already?
It hasn't arrived yet. I'm quite worried about it.
Oh, no.
I'm registered in Cook County, Illinois.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's where my grandpa was born. Yeah.
And I got confirmation in mid-September. And they said, we'll be sending your ballot materials out, and it hasn't arrived yet. Now, one of the problems may be, but I can't get confirmation because nobody is responding to my emails and nobody's answering the telephone at the Cook County clerk. So I am thinking that perhaps the coronavirus is a problem because Thailand has been very difficult with mail coming from the United States. This country, I think it's emblematic of the disrespect that now accrues to the United States, that a mid-tier, tertiary tier country not only doesn't want Americans visiting Thailand, but it's looking askance at mail. And so there's a holdup with mail being delivered from the States to Thailand. And so I am now at a juncture where I've got to find out some different avenues to pursue, because I'm determined to vote this year more than any other year. And I always vote in these presidential elections. So that's my predicament at the moment.
That's terrifying to think about. Everyone overseas who may be experiencing the same delay when it is important this particular year. When you think of 4 years ago, how close some of our states were with the electoral vote, that we need your ballot to reach you.
And I plan to get it in there. I don't miss. You know, voting is, people talk about voting is a right, voting is a privilege. Voting is essential, it's necessary, it's one's duty as a citizen to vote. And we don't even and that's normally at a time like this where the country is on the brink of becoming something else. We're not sure what. I think it's critical that people vote. I think because we're at on a precipice, in my view, at the moment. I know we'll get into this later, but we're really on a precipice of the country becoming something other than what the founders and most of the American population intended.
Let's jump into that now. I mean, I was going to talk about, I want to mention, you've worked at Newsweek, you've written for Newsweek, the Daily Beast, you've been all around the world, over 100 countries, or at least 100, 6 continents. You covered, you've been on the warfield in Iraq. You've been in the Asian tsunami, the Tohoku, is that right? The other tsunami? Fukushima nuclear disaster. You've been on the ground. You've been through situations that would terrify me and terrify most, and also heartbreaking. They rip apart families. Mother Nature is no joke. What we as humans can do by having a nuclear disaster of our own, that starts with our own hands, or a war. You've been right in the middle of it. We'll hit on that for a second before we move into what you think is going to happen in America next. But, out of those instances, what sticks with you the most? Because you keep putting yourself in those situations. Whereas I think the PTSD for me might slow me down or hinder me to take that next step.
As you may know, I did have to deal with and continue to deal with some PTSD.
I didn't know that.
That is true. I will elaborate on that. But my first sort of violent engagement was in Somalia in 1992. And I succeeded a colleague who had to return home because his wife was having a difficult birth. And so I went off to Somalia. And it was a very curious situation, unprecedented, Stormy. You know, we're so used to going through the formalities of immigration and all that. Well, what happened is one sets up in nearby Nairobi, Kenya. I kept a room there for the entire time I was covering the hostilities in Somalia because you had to. So I had my money there, $10,000, and I had all this. And basically, you bummed the lift at the airport whenever you wanted to go into Somalia. A UNICEF plane, a Lutheran World Foundation plane, whatever. And then you arrive in Mogadishu, and you've got your passport, and you're looking to hand it to somebody, and there are no formalities. You just go on about your business because it was such a lawless country, you know. Some curious things, just some anecdotal stuff. Arriving in that country, and keep in mind, Somalia was a combination of war and famine. And so you're in Mogadishu, and people are dropping dead in front of you, largely from famine. And then they had to deal with the hostilities between warring tribes. Keep in mind that Somalia they were not fighting outside people. It was a fight amongst clans, different clans, different warlords. And the common denominator with these people is they're power hungry, they're interested in power, and they don't care particularly who they kill, you know. But I remember the first thing you did when you arrived at the airport was, I don't know if you remember this term, if you're old enough to remember this, but everybody hired a technical. So you leave the airport and there are these technicals lined up there as if they're taxis. A technical was a pickup truck with a machine gun mounted on it, and you had a driver, a gunner, and a minder. And every journalist got one of these, and off you went into town. And I'm arriving into town, and I said, "What's that acrid smell? It's really overpowering." And my minder, fixer, Abdi Rahman, said to me, "Oh, that's just dead people." What happened is they dropped dead and they were just buried in shallow graves of 2 feet or so. Nobody has time to dig 6-foot graves. And so they're still decomposing. And so you're smelling that. And that's what that is. You'll get used to it. And you know what, Storm, to the whole matter of how human nature adjusts. About a week later, a new fellow came in because journalists were coming and going, and he was from Japan. And he said to me, "What's that smell?" Do you know what I said? "What smell?"
Right.
What are you talking about? It's just another day, you know. And you get to a point, the first time they were lobbing grenades and rocket fire and all that, and mortar, just as in Iraq, you're ducking for cover. Within a matter of days, you stay there typing and you go, well, you know, whatever.
That's insanity.
You adjust. Same thing. I was in Tokyo in an earthquake, and the earthquakes there are interesting because the buildings tend to go up and down rather than sway from side to side. So it was going like this, and I got up for a moment. Then I sat down and carried on writing my report to send to Newsweek in New York.
So you must have like extremely low blood pressure, a low pulse.
I do.
Because I'm getting like chills and emotional hearing the stories. So you must just be very calm, like not experience anxiety too much.
I'm not big on anxiety, but I tell you what happened to me, to the PTSD. I was having some problems. I was in the Newsweek office one day and I reached down to pick up a pen and I almost fell because my head was spinning. So this carried on for some time, and finally I sneaked into the American military hospital, which is only for military, so they wouldn't admit me, but I talked my way. Bit of a charmer, you know.
Of course you are.
And the woman said to me, I think you've got some PTSD issues. And I said, don't be ridiculous. I'm not fighting anything. I'm not armed. I'm not a soldier. And she said a very wise thing. She said, what is your job? What do you do? I said, well, I'm embedded with the soldiers. I accompany them in Diyala province and Anbar province and around Baghdad. And I go with them in the dead of night, kicking down doors, looking for Al-Qaeda, and dodging fire from helicopters at 1 o'clock in the morning, and you can't see your hand in front of you. She said, my dear fellow, you're doing exactly as the soldiers, except you're not armed. She said, there's no reason you shouldn't be suffering the same symptoms.
Yes.
And in fact, you should have a bit more anxiety because you can't defend yourself. That's not part of your remit. You are there as an observer. They at least can defend themselves.
Did you feel safe? Like, as a journalist, I know you get a special badge and people kind of respect that, but did you feel safe in these situations?
Yes and no. It depends, or it depended. For example, I would say I came closest to being killed in Somalia, not Iraq. Do you know why? Iraq, it was fairly obvious that I wouldn't be, well, it wasn't that obvious because you've got Arabs who look like me. But typically, it was clear that I was a foreigner, number one, and number two, a journalist. Now, if you're in the theater in Somalia, where everybody is black, and so they've no way to know who I am or if I'm local, and then I've got, sort of reddish hair and an odd look, and, we're all mixed race in America. And so a typical question when you showed up anywhere was, what clan are you? And in most instances, the wrong answer will get you shot, you see?
Right.
So I decided there were two principal warlords fighting in Somalia, a fellow named Mohammed Farah Aidid and another fellow named Ali Mahdi. And I decided I was going to go in pursuit of an interview with Mohammed Farah Aidid. And because they were so elusive, they're not terribly eager to talk to the media. So I said, I'm going to go to his compound. Now, my first clue should have been the fact that my technical crew took me to within a block and a half of the compound and said, we're out. This is as far as we go. We're not going any farther. So I said, right, I'm going to just carry on. And I walked. And I came upon a battery. A battery is people behind sandbags. A battery of 3 teenagers. I would wager 17. And they said, I knew enough Somali. They said, what clan are you? Predictably. And they said, what clan are you? Habar Gadir or Murasade? And I said, neither, I'm a foreigner. And they're like, what? Not understanding me. And as they're getting more impatient, Stormy, the guns are going from down like this to like this. And pretty soon all 3 were trained on my chest. Now, so here's what's curious. A sort of serenity descends on a person. I remember saying to myself, you fool, your crew warned you, but no, you have to have an exclusive. You'll be killed today for a stupid reason. This is what I was saying, but I was very calm, going through this sort of scolding, an interior monologue, if you like.
Yeah.
And they were getting more and more impatient. My fixer is watching this from a block and a half away, and he comes, he's wearing his longi, which is a sarong, and he comes and he's waving to distract them, and he's shouting things. And he's saying, this is not one of us. He's a foreigner. He's from New York. He's here on business. He just wants to do an interview. And they said, take him away. We're not going to let him through to see the warlord. And he's lucky to be alive. Stormy, I was fine until I walked back to the technical, to the pickup truck. And then my knees buckled. You see, the delayed effect. Yeah. Because this was almost certain death because the trigger happy, you see.
Well, and they're not old enough to be any, you know, to reason through anything. Yeah, they're just little kids. They've been shooting people since they were 9.
Exactly right. Child soldiers. And my minder was at once angry and terrified and sorry and crying, and he said, do not do that again.
You probably didn't. I hope. How long were you out there?
That was a short stint for me. I was in Somalia a matter of about 6 weeks. I was in Iraq for 18 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
The reason we abandoned, we left Somalia so quickly is because it was clear that it was an unbelievable quagmire and there was no point in trying to do anything there because it was so intractable. And do you know, it remains intractable. Somalia has not been solved. And I was one of the few 2 or 3 journalists who went up to the north of Somalia, this place called Somaliland, which Somalia was largely an Italian colony. But Somaliland, the Somaliland portion was a British colony, British protectorate. So I went up there to do some stories. I thought I will do something unique until we were driving in Somaliland outside a city called Hargeisa, which is the capital. And I said, I've got to pee. I leapt out of the truck and went off into a field. And then I turned to come back and the men were gesticulating from the truck. You're in a minefield.
Oh my God. What? Oh, Lennox. Dude, I could not live your life. I would be on oxygen and so many, like I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
You know, you're left with your leg like this, like, where do I put my foot? And what they gave advice, can you come as close as possible to taking the route that you took to get there and just retrace your steps backwards.
Oh my God. And you did?
Providence was with me and I survived. But the next time I was in a minefield was in Asia.
The next time? What are you even thinking?
my colleague, the photojournalist, said, you're on your own. I'm not going into that minefield.
What makes you do it?
It's the job, Stormy. You know, I mean, that's an oversimplification, but that's what it is, really. You know, I mean, my attitude is there's no point in doing these jobs if you're not going to do them properly.
Do you have a spirituality that you hang on to? Like, are you a prayer?
No.
So you just, it's all confidence and belief.
I'm an incredible pragmatist. And I'm not a fatalist, interestingly. It's not like I'm one of those people who say, well, you know, if I die, I die, you know, nothing I can do about it. I'm not of that sentiment. I enjoy my life and I would like it to be as long as possible, as long as it's allowed. But I don't, I tend to deal with things head on. To return to the PTSD, for example, that doctor at the Army hospital in Iraq said, my counsel to you is when you get back to Bangkok, because we had what's called outs. So every few months, every couple of months, you were allowed as a war correspondent to get out of Iraq. It was called decompression because it was so intense. So I might go to Istanbul, Kuwait, or Jordan.
Yeah, those sound like really relaxing places.
Egypt.
That's where you went for a break.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was coming back. I was coming back to Bangkok, and she said, "You must see a specialist when you get back." And I said, "Yeah, sure, sure." And I blew that off. And then one day I was walking to the gym. Then I realized I was walking off the sidewalk and into traffic, oncoming traffic, because I lost my balance, you see, from the PTSD. And I turned around from the direction of the gym and walked to the hospital. I was sensible enough to go and seek help. And the fellow said, "You've got a cyst in your brain, mister. It's probably from the glare and the heat and all that, 130-degree heat."
Yeah. And it created a cyst?
Yeah. So that's my Iraq story. Still got
it. All of those stories have me speechless, because I don't think, we see the news, the real news, the true news, like your news. And I don't know that we're giving credit to what journalists are actually putting themselves through, but that brings up in my mind, Jamal, and I want to say his name correctly, Khashoggi.
It's Jamal Khashoggi.
Okay, then I would have said it. Khashoggi?
No, you have to say the hard one. Khashoggi. Like
Khashoggi.
Exactly right.
Very good. That brings, he popped into my mind with this, with your stories, because we all remember he was a reporter, a Saudi Arabian reporter that went into was it a Turkish embassy? Is that correct?
He went into a Saudi embassy in Turkey.
Okay, so it was the Saudi embassy, his own country's embassy.
Correct.
In Turkey. And we talked a little bit, you did, about Saudi Arabians, the women not being able to go outside without a man or a male, even if it's a 5-year-old little boy. She needed his accompaniment. So Jamal goes in. He's a great journalist, wasn't he? Like he was telling stories and truth in a country
he worked for the Washington Post.
That's right. And a country that suppresses truth, I think, sometimes. And then he's gone.
He's killed and dismembered in the consulate.
And to my knowledge, no one's held accountable to this day.
Well, this is where the United States government comes in, because all indications are that this was a killing ordered by MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. His father is Salman, the king. Bin Salman means son of Salman. So Mohammed bin Salman, he's known, I shouldn't say affectionately, but he's known around Saudi Arabia as MBS for his initials. And he is the heir apparent in Saudi Arabia, and he has been busy consolidating his power and making sure he gets rid of royal rivals, not to mention, of course, dissidents. And Khashoggi was definitely a dissident, because he wrote from America about the excesses of the Saudi regime. Problem being, we have a government that coddles strongmen. You have to understand that the United States, among its sundry roles, has always played this sort of the role of the powerful country that says to other countries, behave yourself. This is unacceptable. You have got to do this and that. Human rights, civil rights, the rights of women, free elections, and so on. Well, as you know, that's all off the table. One of the more recent stories I did for Newsweek talked about how Trump has enabled dictators in this region, because they no longer have the United States looking over their shoulders, telling them to behave themselves. So you have, for example, in Philippines, you have Rodrigo Duterte, who's the president, And he has killed north of 25,000 people in his so-called drug wars because he gave the police extrajudicial power to kill drug dealers and drug users. And my research showed that whilst the Trump administration was not directly telling the embassies in this region to not get involved, it was conducting benign neglect. So diplomats were telling me, I was saying, well, are you getting instructions from Washington to just ignore that and not get involved? And they said, no. What we're getting is no instructions. You see?
Yeah.
So we're not being enabled to do anything because basically we can tell that Washington doesn't want us to get involved. And this obtains in the case of MBS because Trump has struck a very close relationship with Saudi Arabia and with Mohammed bin Salman specifically. And so what happened is Saudi Arabia prosecuted scapegoats. All the underlings who actually went there and sawed up the body and all this business were given jail sentences or executed. But the people at the top, led by MBS, escaped unscathed because there was no insistence on justice by the people who were in a position to do so, which would be the United States administration.
How do we, I mean, you think about that, it's mind blowing and you can see it. And when we talk about MBX or MBS,
yes,
we're talking billions and billions of personal wealth, right?
Correct. They're all
6 billion. Yeah, it outrageous, more than 1 billion. So you're multiple billions.
Multiple billions. And you have to understand that a lot of these people, whatever money they have personally, some of these strongmen tend to use the national treasury as their personal checking account. And so there's no appreciable difference in their mind between the people's money and their money. I remember there was a despot running Equatorial Guinea, which is in Africa. And he spent his own money and he spent the country's money on his stuff, his furnishings and his cars and his investments overseas and so on. There was no appreciable difference for him between public funds and his own private funds. So whatever money you've got, let's say you've got $5 billion and the Treasury has $50 billion, you consider that part of your sinecure, you see?
Yes. Yes.
When I was in, one other anecdote, when I was in Africa, I was teaching journalism in Africa in Malawi and Uganda and Zimbabwe. And the problem was, so I did an interview with government people in Malawi, and they were in some despair because the superannuated president, he was like in his 90s, had siphoned off some $2 billion from a very, very poor African country, a small country, and had sort of secreted it abroad. And he was dying in his 90s. Hastings Banda was his name. And all these people were saying to me, he will die and that money will disappear into the ether because nobody knows where it is in Switzerland or Cayman or whatever. And that's $2 billion that Malawi desperately needs. But he took that money, he siphoned that money off and secreted it away in Europe. And so he died and no one knows what happened to the funds.
That's true?
That is a true story.
How do you keep all this in your mind and sleep at night? Like, honestly, like, is there a way out? You are a truth teller by nature. You've been telling the truth. You're committed to telling the truth to the point that you'll risk your life to get people the absolute truth, which is so honorable. And especially, I want to get to our government, but I have to say, like, what do you think about Fox News and CNN? Like, and then Trump always, saying the fake news. And I know in the 80s, I think there was a law that said news can now become commentary versus facts. What is your take on that type of journalism?
I mean, news has been a victim of technology and of nefarious interests.
Mm-hmm.
Technology, because you don't have by definition, you used to have newspapers, television stations, and radio. With the onset of the internet, you've got all these podcasts and everybody has a blog and so on. And so the line between journalism and dilettantism has been so blurred. Everybody and his brother is now identifying himself or herself as a journalist. And worse, the rank and file, the population, the ordinary people in America can't tell the difference.
That's right.
And so you've got all these people who are pontificating and writing blogs and so on, a lot of it with a point of view, if not just rancid speculation and conspiracy theories. And so the American people, who are already not exactly learned and considerably ignorant about journalism and world affairs, Americans are behind the curve when you compare them with other first world countries like the Europeans, who are better read, better traveled, more sophisticated in politics, and so on. Superimpose on that people like Murdoch and all the Breitbart and Steve Bannon, who arrive with an intention of muddying the waters. That's their remit. They have no interest in providing proper news. Fox News is a misnomer. Fox has very little to do with news. What we have is a bunch of people pontificating and taking positions almost exclusively on behalf of the president and the Republican Party. And they've got tens of millions of people in America who swear by what they say. And so this is the first bifurcation in what had been traditionally understood to be journalism. You've got these people who are at best quasi-journalists, and in many cases not journalists at all.
Well, they're just reading a script.
Correct. They insist they're journalists when they're on the air, but when they're hauled into court, like Tucker Carlson was, the Fox argument against him being sanctioned by a court was, no one really thinks of Tucker Carlson. This is his company as news. That was their defense. But the rest of the time, they're like, we're journalists, I'm Sean Hannity, but they're not journalists. And then they are aided and abetted by a president who goes around ridiculing, belittling, and threatening the media, enemies of the people, fake news, they should all be in jail, the failing New York Times. I can't tell you the damage that Donald Trump has done in less than 4 years to the Fourth Estate.
Yes.
He's presided over an administration that has created doubt in the minds of tens of millions of Americans about the proper value of the media. In fact, many think the media should be disbanded and should be jailed. This is where we are. And the only thing that will fix that is a change of administration. And even then it will take time, because these people have been so, I don't want to say brainwashed, but they have been so inculcated with this whole notion that the media are to be feared and to be suspicious of and to be dismissed and denigrated and harassed, if not actually physically assaulted at all these rallies and so on. This is the drumbeat the president has been perpetrating for 4 years.
What do you think happens? What do you think happens? Excuse me. What do you think happens if he gets reelected? Like in our country?
I think the country is driven off a cliff. Here's my view. people tend to want to, particularly over here, expatriates, they tend to want to engage me in discussions about policy. Well, you know, Republican policy versus Democratic policy. And I say, we are well beyond that. We are talking about the survival of the American experiment as postulated by the founding fathers. You have a guy here who has no respect for, no regard for, no interest in the Constitution. He has a preponderant interest in Donald Trump, and he will stop at nothing to pursue Donald Trump's interests. And so I think 4 more years of Donald Trump could well push the country over an edge from which it can't recover.
Do you think, I want to hit on the Constitution really quick, because when that Constitution was written, neither you nor I were considered as part of it. No, neither one of us were considered as part of it or having a voice there or equal rights, honestly.
You were chattel and I was 3/5 of a person.
Yeah, that's right. That is right. So when we base off of that, you know, how do you view that? It's only 243 years later. I've been able to vote for 100 years. You've been able to vote, I think, for 130. Is that right?
Theoretically, apart from Jim Crow and all the obstructions that
right
through
written in.
Right. How do I view it in a sense of
like moving forward, or how we stand on that? And then Donald, you know, Trump, in your example, is disregarding it when, you know, he may be taking it extremely literal.
I'm going to say something that's probably going to rile some people and perhaps shock some people and disappoint some people. But I think Americans have a deluded view of themselves. The country has always postulated this notion that we as a people are special, exceptional. We are not like these other countries, the UK and France and all the old colonizers. We are special. We have some unique attributes. We're different. We are better. We are so aware of democracy and civil rights and decency and good behavior. And I think to a considerable degree, it's a farce. I think that the United States is profoundly racist, for example. I think it was built on slavery and it continues to grapple with that, except people don't really want to grapple with it. And I think people blame Trump for making everybody ugly. I think what Trump has done is he's given permission to people who were already grossly bigoted and prejudiced and intolerant, and he made it permissible for them to crawl out from under the rug, if you like. If you think about the American system, president after president, administration after administration, irrespective of party, the president made it his business to lead, to set an example. Whatever he may think privately, he would say, you know, we can't treat our fellow people that way, Black people or Mexicans or women or disabled or whatever. The difference with this man is he said, by all means, knock yourself out. I will be right there next to you, assisting you in that. That's unprecedented. But I don't blame him for suddenly making the country racist or intolerant and so on. I give him credit or demerit for egging these people on, for instigating them to show their terrible natures, which were always there. You see? So I'm not one of the Pollyanna-ish people who think, oh, he's really polluted the American dream and the American decency and the American sense of fair play. I think that's rubbish. I think there is a solid minority. I would put it at as high as 40% of Americans who are like this regardless.
I would agree with that. And I think that was so well said that he he has shown there is a light on what the word systemic actually means. Because systemic means, it's, in my mind, it's so tightly woven that you really don't even know it's there. Like, you're not aware because you are in the box, you're in the fabric. And that's where, you know, when we talk about systemic issues in our country, women, Black people, minorities, all of that, it is difficult for some people to really see because they are part of the fabric, and that's okay.
That's right.
It's getting there.
When, just to underscore my point that this is not about Trump, when George Bush was president, I was night city editor. That means I ran the night operation at the newspaper. And I'm a car aficionado, love cars. So I always had fancy cars and so on, even if I weren't eating. No, just kidding. So I had a big British racing green BMW 750 IL, and I had a red Porsche 911. Now I have my indulgences. Somebody else might buy ecstasy or whatever. My thing was cars and Armani suits.
You deserve both.
I was stopped in both of those cars. One time at 2 o'clock in the morning, coming home from work and observing the speed limit. And another time in a trendy part of Dallas called Deep Ellum in my low-slung red Porsche. The fellow who stopped me with the BMW and the fellow who stopped me with the Porsche, both white cops, began with the same opening gambit. Is this your car?
Right. And why did they say they pulled you over?
You want to give them the answer they expect, which is, no, I just jacked it.
Right.
You see?
Right.
But
yeah.
You don't want to, but I was a fairly, you know, I had a big job, at least with the nighttime guy. And I said, oh, you mean you lot are still doing this sort of thing? He said, doing what? I said, stopping minorities for being in the wrong neighborhood, because I was living in an inburb of Dallas called Park Cities that was so powerful that Dallas was not able to annex them. They had so much money. So Dallas developed around them and they remained independent suburbs within Dallas. And I was the sort of sole Black person. I said, and I was very conversational. I said, I thought you put paid to this because we just chatting. So we did some stories on this. It appears I might have to dispatch another team to look at this again. And he's like, what? And I said, oh, I'm sorry. Here's my car.
Right.
That's my new night city editor. You know what he said to me?
Huh.
Mr. Samuels, please go ahead. I hope you realize that this is for your own protection. The classic one.
Oh my God. Isn't that, now that's nasty, you know, that's where the word nasty belongs. Not on reporters that.
Looks at my insurance information. He says, it says here that you've got a 4-door sedan at BMW. And I said, yes. And he got really sarcastic and resentful. He said, maybe you should drive the sedan more often, because then you wouldn't be tempted to be racing your red sports Porsche.
What?
The quote.
I'm sorry. That is just disgusting. Like, I don't think people understand.
They don't understand.
But
you know, everybody talks about, Black people talk about being followed in stores and all this, and it's so true. No matter how sympathetic a white person tries to be, and many are, it's difficult for them to actually get it, because you don't have to deal with this day in, day out.
Right. Don't have to be afraid just because you're driving your car. Like,
I don't have to. I went into a store and everywhere I turned, there was somebody following. And so, you know, I'm a little bit different. I'm a little bit more aggressive, and I'm what condescending white people would say, "Oh, he's articulate," So I said,
Right.
I said to the fellow, I said, "What do you want?" And he said, sort of nervous. He said, "I'm just want to be on hand in case you need anything." I said, "My dear fellow, you've got everything marked, sizes, prices, and so on. I can find it, and then if I need you, I can call you and ask a question." I said, "But I don't need accompaniment around the store. Get back to your station." But who talks like that? You know me. I recognize that I have a certain privilege myself, being in that sort of job and being, frankly, somewhat arrogant. But a lot of people don't have that facility, and they leave the store angry and resentful and so on, and say, "I'll never go back." But this is the sort of thing they deal with day in, day out.
And I wouldn't call you arrogant. I would call you empowered. And I think you've met, 17-year-olds with guns that are more scary than the guy that follows you around a store. Like, I'm pretty sure you can take him.
Well, you take my point. It's the basic point is that the country's self-image is delusional on a certain level. And so the notion that once Trump leaves, everything will be hunky-dory is over enthusiastic, because I think it's going to be hard to put this toothpaste back in the tube, because so many people have been enabled to behave badly for these 4 years, and they're not particularly prepared to go back to being docile. And furthermore, they're heavily armed, and they're showing up at the Michigan Capitol heavily armed and threatening Governor Whitmer on all this stuff that this president has enabled. But it's not all on him. That's all I'm saying.
That's right. That's right. It's on all of us, and we have reached our hour. So I'm going to ask, will you come back after the election?
We have all kinds of things to talk about.
We have so much more to talk about. I can't, I've got like 10 questions. I want you to mentor me. I want all kinds of stuff, but I definitely want you to come back after the election. And I want to end with this. To all the listeners out there, we still have time to vote. We have to look beyond our own backyard, even though our own backyard is on fire. The things Lennox has talked about today, it's a global thing. We are all connected. And if COVID has showed us one thing, it's that we are all vulnerable to the same things. We are all human. You take away, we're all connecting electronically. Color of our skin, our religion, where we, stomp our feet when we stand up. None of that matters. What matters is we create a world that we can all live in for generations to come, for our grandchildren, of peace and harmony. And that means you get to believe what you want to believe, and I get to believe what I want to believe, but we respect each other while we do it.
And so it's about the country.
Yes, it's about the country.
It's not about Republicans and Democrats. It's about the United States and where the country is going to go and how well it's going to work going forward.
And we all have to be aware of that. We still have a wonderful country. You referred to it as an experiment earlier. I say that a lot. Like, we are a young country. We're 243 years old. This is young. We are barely figuring it out. In relation to Europe, we're like in preschool. We're just getting started.
Westminster Abbey was built in 1066, for heaven's sake, in London.
Incredible, right?
Very young country.
So we have our growing pains, and this is part of it, but we know what's right and wrong. We know this in our hearts, and it's just important that we participate in this process. I'm running this year as a Democrat for the Utah State House of Representatives. This is a very, thank you. It's been.
I don't have any time because I could have talked a little bit about Utah.
Oh my. We should get back on this as soon as possible, because I can talk a lot about Utah right now and what this experience has been like as a single woman who has actively supported and been an advocate for the cannabis plant. And I'm non-LDS. So it's been quite, and I'm a Democrat. Good Lord, I got to put that in there. That this has been quite interesting, and a lot of what you said about the permission that our president has given recently applies to me too. And as far as how I've been treated, and I don't want to give up, and I don't want us to be in a civil war. I don't want to leave this country when my time is up less than for my grandchildren. I want it to be more than, better than, bigger than, but just the best it can be. And I hope that people have learned from you, Lennox, like I have, and your bravery, your commitment to bringing the truth, and then your knowledge as to how you view the world, because you do have a global view. Yeah. It's not just,
Next time we can talk about how the reputation of the country abroad. It's not a pretty thing. So,
now, I know you're getting ready to move to Portugal, but would you ever move back?
That's on the back burner because of coronavirus. I've been here 10 years, and I had vowed that this would be the last year. My visa expires, Thai visa expires at the end of the year, and I thought, right, that's the last of it. I don't have to apply, but I am applying for another year because I have to. I can't be out of status, and I can't move anywhere because I have canceled about 8 trips since I returned from the United States February 20th, and I haven't been out of the country since. Normally, I would have made 8 major trips in that time.
Right. That alone is enough to create a little bit of anxiety that you don't get.
Climbing the walls.
Yeah. Well, will you be moving back to the U.S. anytime soon if the coronavirus wasn't a factor? No. Portugal it is?
Portugal it is, and other places. I've got so many, and you had sent me some questions. There are so many places that I've still to go, and you had wanted me to recommend some places and so on. I mean, you've got 2 shows here, 3. So my attitude is that there are loads of other places to see and go before going back to home, whatever home is, because you've done that. Just between us, I've had assignments abroad, but in addition to that, I've always added 1 or 2 countries every year that I've never been, regardless of work or no work.
I'm so jealous.
Last year, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Lima, Peru.
Oh, I went to Lima 2 years ago. Phenomenal.
So those are my 2. And last year, as 2 years ago, last year I added Norway and Denmark.
Where, if you had to pick a forever home right now and you had to say, I have to live here forever, where would it be?
Paris.
Paris? Really? I've never been.
I'm a big city guy. I've slept on beaches in Baidoa, Somalia, and I've slept on sofas in Prague, Czech Republic, and so on. But I'm an urban creature. I like big cities. I grew up loving London, and London's a bit overrun. And I've switched my allegiance to Paris, which is such a beautiful city. In addition to offering all the things that London and New York do, which is to say, one is never bored. I haven't been bored in any of those 3 cities.
I bet. I don't think you've been bored in the middle of the jungle in Somalia. I mean, I don't think that's in your vocabulary is like, hey, I'm bored today. Maybe now.
I dodge bored.
Yeah.
I go out of my way to not do that.
You dodge bullets and you dodge bored. 2 opposite extremes, and you're dodging both of them. You're fascinating.
That's great fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to be in touch, and I hope you never say no to me.
That would be true. I'm not going to say no to you.
Thank you. Then when you get to Portugal and I come visit, I'm sleeping on your couch.
I had a real estate person identify a place for me in Porto, which is the 2nd city, far more interesting than Lisbon, and it all fell apart.
I hate COVID.
You could be there.
Yes, and I hate COVID. I am it, but I've learned a lot about myself and about the simple things and things I needed to appreciate more anyway. So
Pain in the ass, and it's like it's never going to end. But it can't end if people don't do the right thing, you know.
wear
I
your
mean,
mask.
how, this business of not wearing a mask is some kind of violation of your rights. I haven't heard anything more preposterous and ridiculous and stupid. It's just a mask.
And it's just in the US, right? Everywhere else, people wear masks.
A few people in Europe, nobody here. If you get on public transport in Thailand, in Bangkok, 100% of the people on the trains and the buses are wearing masks.
And nobody's mad.
They're not complaining or they're bitching about their rights and civil rights and liberty and freedom and all this business. It's a mask. They have said to me, it's a mask. What is wrong with Americans making a production about their rights being violated? I said, I'm just passing through.
With my mask on.
If I weren't talking to you, when I leave, I always have my mask.
Yeah.
And when I come into my building, you must have your mask to enter the building.
And it's not that hard. Just like you have to have your pants on.
Hello.
That's right. Well, this has been the most enjoyable and provoking, thought-provoking, little bit disturbing on what we've, talked about today, but definitely the lunch. I want to have lunch with you once a month just to keep the world straight.
I'm here for you. And I will always have new stuff.
I bet you do.
Because journalism is such, I may not, it's interesting, I don't particularly want to write anything, and I don't, but I keep up. You still have sources, you still have people calling you, you still attend meetings, you talk to people. And I've got notebooks filled with stuff for a couple of books at some juncture.
I'm going to do my own investigative stuff, and I'm going to use you as a source. I don't know what it is yet, but I have a lot of ideas about where little bones may be buried. And
I can tell you where the skeletons are buried.
That's right. And it's time to share them so people can wake up, not be brainwashed, and start participating in the planet the way that we need to participate, whether that's running for office, growing your own garden, making sure our food isn't sprayed with toxins, making sure our water is clean. Those are all making sure nuclear waste isn't buried in your own backyard like it is in mine right now. And we have to get back to basics. It doesn't make us cavemen. It makes us smart.
Call me anytime. And as I said, this was my maiden voyage and I quite enjoyed it. And I hope you picked up a few things along the way because, I've been around.
I could talk to you for 17 days straight, I think, and never be bored. Be dodging boredom.
We'll do it again.
Thank you, Lennox Samuels, for, I don't know, I'm a little bit speechless about some of what we talked about, and even more so about some of the things we weren't able to get to during this lunch hour. But I want to thank everybody for listening. I want them to look up Lennox Samuels and some of the work that he has done and the progress he has made through his work, whether that be in exposing a story, violence against women, but continuing just to be a truth seeker and then tell that truth is something we can all learn from. You can follow me on all the social handles of Stormy Simon. Listen to the podcast on Apple Podcast or whatever platform you listen to your podcasts on. Find Lunch with Stormy and give us a 5-star review. Thank you so much for being here for this Liberty Lunch, and I look forward to next time.